So, yes, we have Zangulus the Bounty Hunter, which was a warrior class, so fighter class, level 5. He was pretty tough compared to some of the other characters. I made him to be formidable, but of course, they ended up, when he came to basically collect his bounty on the heroes, they ended up finding a way to convince him that it would be in his best interest to join with them. So, you know, they were being really clever and avoiding a lot of combat, which could have potentially, you know, not been good for them. Although, they did kick some serious ass, so. And he's got one of those Diablo swords, the unique magical demon blade of Flash. So, you know, it can run web videos. Let's see, Flash. It's a spell. You can cast it up to 3 times daily. What does Flash do? Other than go really, really fast. Let's see, it probably is the 2nd edition version. It's a old 2nd edition sheet, because we had just barely started upgrading to 3rd before we quit. I was even using the 3rd edition quest material with the 2nd edition rules for a long time, because when 3rd edition came out, we were really stubborn to upgrade, which is kind of what we're doing now, I guess. Some people could accuse us of, but I just feel happy enough with where the rules, where it sort of reached in 3rd edition, or rather 3.5, which was just an updated version that kind of fixed some issues. But I really like 3.5. And also what I've seen of Pathfinder, which I mentioned earlier in this vlog, is basically 3.75. I don't really see the need to continue from there. I'm happy where I'm at, I think. Sorry. Let's see. Flash. EFG Flash. A ring of intense magical energy flares around the caster, inflicting 1d10 plus 1 points of damage per level of the caster on all creatures within a 5-foot radius around the caster. Save versus spell for half. Maximum damage for Flash is 15d10 plus 15, so that's like, you could do up to like 165, I think, points of damage if you're a high-level sorcerer when you cast that, so. Man, 1d10 plus 1 per caster level, that's pretty intense, dude. Let me double check, what level spell is that? Flash. Oh, level 5, that sounds about right. I mean, arcane spells are getting pretty powerful when you reach that level, level 5, so that makes sense. We have Thena of the Sightless Eye. She's the rogue. The party's, you know, required rogue or thief of the party. Everybody has to have a thief in the party, you know, for traps and picking locks. And well, she was a really good archer, too. Like the rogues in the Diablo 1 game. That was what their weapon was. The bow was one of the weapons they were the best at. Anyways, I think you could give them other weapons, but they were primarily a ranged attacker. And then we have Lathos Roivus, or known as Lathos Deathspawn. And he was the necromancer of the party. Let's see, level 4, neutral. Let's see, what was Thena's level? I think she was also level 5. Let's see, alignment also, oh, chaotic neutral. Oh, so she was a bit of a, well, I think I started off as neutral, and then I have this tiny little, like, lazy C that I wrote in there. My handwriting was awful back then. You can compare her sheet to Lathos's, which was one I made later on, because I think I had to, like, rewrite a sheet or give him a new one. It's crazy what just a few years will make for somebody's handwriting. And these are all 2nd editions. Some of the rules are just really odd. And I learned with that version of D&D, but I'm so accustomed to future versions that I go back and look at some of the stuff I wrote. And, you know, a lot of the rules for 2nd edition have started to leave me. So, and then there are the ones that nobody understands, or nobody can get right, or it's just a major pain. Like, the Thaco rule, which, back in 2nd edition, armor class was better the lower the number was. Which, you know, it's just, and there were other things like that too, which with the die 20 system, which is, and I think pretty much from 3rd edition D&D onward up, it's always higher rolls, better than lower rolls, higher numbers better than lower numbers, which is just much more simple, I think, and much easier for players to grasp. Because I remember trying to teach my friends from school when I was like 11 years old with my basic D&D set, and some of them were like really confused why lower was better than higher, because in most situations you would think common sense would dictate that the bigger number means a better result on a die roll, which later on it pretty much always was. Let's see. And Lathos, the Necromancer, he had a really tragic backstory. You know, really, I don't know, I could have been even in a mood when I wrote it, or I just wanted to create something really tragic for him, where, you know, he was this bright, you know, young man, and he had just gotten married, and he had this, like, little daughter, with his wife, and the demons came and attacked, and they killed them all, and he swore vengeance, and, you know, really dramatic. I think Zelos, the mysterious priest, was going to be involved in that somehow, I believe. But it never came out in the game yet. It was supposed to be probably like a big reveal, like, oh, you're the one who did it, you know, or you were, you know, you knew it was going to happen, or there was going to be some sort of big shocker connection. See, Alexandra, I made you really boring. Eric the Paladin, you were pretty boring too. You know, a really cookie cutter, typical, you know, goody two shoes paladin, little goody two shoes. I was actually going to kill him off, because nobody really liked him in the party. From what I can remember, he was sort of just a source of annoyance. He was just the, you know, you can't do that, or don't do that, or, you know, all, you know, he would nag on the other members of the party and just be this really, really goody two-shoes kind of guy. And the characters that my player characters had were not always morally the best sorts of people. Which worked, I guess, in the darker context of Diablo. But, like, when they were dealing with Redbeard, the Barbarian Warlord, they had a message sent. This is before they joined up in a pact. This is when he first sort of showed up and was being planned out as the big bad villain. So, he sends a couple of guys to try and, I don't remember if it was going to deliver a message or kill the heroes, but, you know, they come across some of his underlings, and they send a message back to them, and they have the Necromancer carve the message with his dagger into the messenger's chest, and then send him back. And it was really kind of brutal, but the characters were acting out of their alignment, so it's okay. Except for, you know, if Eric had been there, you know, then it would be like, in that web series, The Gamers, oh, look, someone needs help, you know, just to distract him so they can torture the bad guys, without him being like, we can't do it, it's wrong. And then Mordak, which is, the Necromancer who trained Lathos, the name I stole from, King's Quest III, which is the villain in King's Quest III, although my Mordak in here was a good Mordak. Well, actually, he was neutral, but, you know, he was an ally to the heroes. And a vampire, which I believe I added later on. Once I created Tanya, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to make Mordak a vampire now, because vampires. Let's see, oh, and then Redbeard's right hand, General Kale, which is another name taken right out of Willow, although the general part came later, and he wasn't actually inspired by that Kale, but the name I think is spelled the same. And he, because of the movie Willow, and because his name was Kale, he ended up being associated with that Kale in the movie Willow, and I eventually, even though I never intended for him to be anything like that character, started becoming more like that character. And he was going to try and betray the heroes, even in spite of the pact that they had made with Redbeard, because he resented my brother's character, the son of Redbeard, for sort of coming in after, because he had been estranged from Redbeard, my brother's character, Turk. He hadn't really seen his father his whole life. Redbeard sort of left him, like, you know, with his mother and then went off to raid and pillage and never returned. But after the two of them met, they started becoming, you know, a bit closer again. And Kale sort of resented that because he was almost like a son to Redbeard in the absence of Redbeard's actual son. So there was that whole villain motivation that was going to come back and bite the heroes in the ass eventually, which never happened, but it would have. Razul, which was the captain of the head of Salik's guard. So the sorcerer Salik, the one that I said was based off of Jafar, had the leader of his soldiers named after the leader of Jafar's soldiers, Razul. Or as my sister-in-law always said, Fazul, like pasta Fazul, I guess, or something. So it always got a chuckle out of her. The name Razul was never taken seriously as this, you know, warrior with the big scimitar that you need to watch out for, like he was gonna be. But, you know, it's okay. He never showed up, because Salik never showed up. So he was just mentioned to sort of build up the future meeting that never happened. And then we have Salik, which is a level 20 sorcerer. Which, level 20, in almost any version of D&D, is as high of level as you can get before you're considered an epic level character. And by that point, your characters are going to be fighting against, you know, or becoming gods, basically, or demigods. They are so powerful that the adventures they're going to have to undertake if you want to keep playing as those characters rather than retire them are going to be huge, like, world-shattering quests. And yeah, I made Salik level 20, because I wanted to make him as powerful as possible. And looking at his sheet, he could potentially be more challenging for my heroes if I had pit them against him than even Diablo himself, maybe. And I could compare, but he's got less hit points than Diablo, but these spells in his spellbook, man, or just, you know, the Apocalypse spell. I mean, good lord. That has to be pretty intense. In fact, I think it does exist in 3rd edition. I would look up the 2nd edition version, because that's what it would have been. This is all 2nd edition D&D. But I only have the Dungeon Master's Guide with me right now, so we'll have to do that another time. I think the Player's Handbook is somewhere out there. And I could get up, but let's just keep moving on. Then I had the Good Wizard, which is sort of based off of the, not wizard, but a sorcerer, sorry. The good sorcerer who is like the Obi-Wan to Salik's Darth Vader. He is this old sorcerer who was the adopted father of my sister-in-law's character, the sorceress Zara. So see, I had all of these familial things going on, too. And he is basically going to help the heroes fight Salik to the best of his ability. But Salik was far more powerful than him. The two of them had been enemies for like years and years and years, but because Salik had a high-placing seat on the Sorcerer's Council, as did Tarman, their war against each other was very Cold War-ish, very, you know, behind the scenes. They could never openly strike out against each other, and so, you know, Salik was trying to recruit his own underlings who could try and you know, killed Taraman, which was the name of the good sorcerer, which, you know, Saruman, but with a new letter. I reused him in another campaign later and renamed him Taram to sort of get rid of that Saruman-y sound. But he was gonna, you know, need the heroes to help him battle Salik without implicating him the same way. So, you know, basically the heroes would have been almost sort of used by politicians against, you know, each other. But that never happened either, but that's kind of what I was going for. Let's see, it's now the Random Barbarian, Quell. I don't think I really used him too much. I ended up taking that Barbarian Quell and turning him into my main character for my playthrough of Baldur's Gate 2. So, I reused names and character concepts from different stories, role-playing games, things I've written, over and over again quite a bit, because I'll put them in something and want to keep playing around with the character and seeing what else I can do with them, like a reimagined in a new campaign or whatever. So I do that a lot. And here we go. Crom the Barbarian. So you can see I was really using my imagination. That was the default barbarian from Diablo 2, was Crom, named after the god of Conan, Crom. And he was the older brother of my sister's character, Kaisha. And then we had, see, they're in no order. We keep jumping around like groups and allegiances. Redbeard's sort of right-hand woman or mistress, or, you know, I don't think he ever took her as a wife, but she was this warrior woman, Tayra. Neutral evil, so she was pretty bad, but I think Redbeard, who's on the next page, yeah, he was neutral evil too, which, I won't get too much into D&D alignments because that could take a while to explain. But neutral evil characters are pretty much only in it for themselves. They're very self-serving. I didn't understand that back when I made these characters. I thought neutral evil meant, you know, you're not good or bad, but you're kind of more bad than you are good. Like neutral evil, like, you know. But that's not what it means. They would probably be a different alignment if I made them now. But yeah, Redbeard was a level 15 barbarian. The Dark Warlord of the North, he was called. And I reimagined him for Skyrim, as I mentioned before. Let's see, he had a really cool weapon, or weapons. Gosh, I decked him out too. He has the Lord's Axe of Destruction, which is double base damage on a 14 through 20. So, if you roll a 20-sided die, and you get a 14 or higher, the damage you roll when you hit with that weapon is double. So, which is the same as if you get a critical hit in D&D. But man, that threat range... So, yeah, let's see what damage that does. 1 die 10 plus 11. Holy crap. So, that would be a potential of 2 die 10 plus 22 points of damage, as long as he rolls at least a 14. Nuts. Mithril Sword of Burning, which has fire damage. Studded leather armor of spikes, so it's spiked armor. So, you know, if somebody attacks you successfully, it hurts them back. That sort of thing. Maddock, that was the barbarian working for Redbeard, who they carved the message into the chest of. To basically be really cruel. Kull, another barbarian named after Kull the Conqueror, which is another Robert E. Howard character like Conan, played by Kevin Sorbo. A really, really cheesy sword and sorcery flick from the 1997 or 98 or whatever. Yeah, the Paladins, Sir Philip and Sir Andrew, which I believe are biblical names, which I believe I chose on purpose because, you know, Paladins. Very, very clever me. Zelos' character sheet. Zelos, that's the character I mentioned from Slayers, the mysterious priest. He is ridiculously powerful, which is accurate to the source material that I adapted him from. In fact, he's probably more powerful in Slayers than I made him with the 2nd edition D&D rules, but he is a fighter, mage, priest. Level 15 fighter, level 13 mage, level 15 priest. Yeah, he is really powerful. And I even made my own rules for the magical amplifiers, which the character has in the anime, which is gems, one worn like right here, like a pendant, and another on the belt. Can't see my waist, but yeah, and then there's 2 on the wrists. And together they make a spell way more powerful than if it were cast by a spellcaster without it. And I actually created my own rules for those, which definitely not handled necessarily the most balanced way, but I didn't care. With Zelos, I always kind of went larger than life and more powerful than you could possibly imagine. And then I have detailed, notes here for different regions in the world. Some other NPCs. Oh yeah, I had a character who was going to be inspired by the character Locke from the TV show Lost, but he didn't really get used much. That was the very final session that we ever did of the Diablo campaign, is when he was introduced, and that was right around like the first or second season of Lost. And he was my favorite character, so I had to put him in my game, obviously. He was a level 5 ranger. Well, ranger works for Locke. Ardith Bay from The Mummy. Saur the Sorceress's brother. I have him here. All 2nd edition rules, though. I didn't do a whole lot of work with the conversions to 3rd. Earlier I mentioned how I copied my own text, or transcribed my own text from the Diablo 1 game to use in my game. So I have here typed up a really battered piece of paper. Basically, my little script I would read off of. So they're like the rumors that the people in town and Tristram will tell the player when they go and talk to them. And all of this text wasn't put in the D&D books, so I decided I would do it myself, for authenticity, so you really felt like you were playing Diablo. But it just, and it was part of contributed to those early days of the campaign where you were literally just playing the game verbatim on the tabletop or whatever. We actually didn't use a tabletop, but we don't usually use a tabletop, even though it's tabletop gaming. I've never had, save for like a couple of times in any of our gaming groups, actually have a really good sized table. So, useless anecdote, number 2. Anyways. So yeah, let's see here. You have Cain, stay a while and listen. Poor Farnham. He is a disquieting reminder of the doomed assembly that entered into the cathedral with Lazarus on that dark day. You get the picture, right? I did the voices, too. I love doing the voices when I Dungeon Master. So, let's see. Griswold, the blacksmith, talking about the peg-legged boy, Wirt. That lad is going to get himself into serious trouble. Or should I say, again. I've tried to interest him in working here and learning an honest trade, but he prefers the high profits of dealing in goods of dubious origin. So, little preview for the fun that we had. Love doing the voices of the characters in the game. Here's a dumb thing we had. Okay, not the barbarian, the necromancer, Lathos, had the ability, like necromancers do, to reanimate his own undead minions, right? So they had, looks like, 4 zombies that he had under his control. And those zombies would, go off and fight the other monsters and whatnot. We all gave them names. Really dumb if you think about it. It was all good fun, but tonally just does not fit into the grim gothic setting of Diablo. Zombies like the zombie Nick, or the zombie Knock, the zombie George the zombie, and Gordy. Don't forget Gordy, everybody's favorite zombie. So I got a magic item list I had done. Like I said, all of my free time when I wasn't doing schoolwork in junior high was pretty much working on the Diablo campaign. It was pretty much divided between that and my computer games at the time, which a lot of the time I would just be sitting there playing Diablo in between working on the notes for the Diablo game. So Diablo, I couldn't get enough of it. I just couldn't play the second one because our computer was old and wouldn't play it. So, sad story. I got family trees for the barbarian clans, some of my own dungeon maps for dungeons that I made up that they had to go to, like an outpost for the cult of the 3, I believe, which was a cult of Diablo, Baal, and Mephisto. Really nasty people that the heroes had to take down. And I believe, yeah, you actually fought cults of the primevals or lesser evils, I can't remember which, in Diablo 3. But you didn't really in the first Diablo game, which is all I had to go off at the time. So I remember when I was playing through Diablo 3 with my wife, I had to laugh when we encountered a cult very similar to the cult I had put in my game years and years before, having no idea that I would eventually encounter something almost exactly the same in a Diablo game. But, you know, here's a quick look at the map. You know, I've gotten better at drawing my D&D maps since those days as well. It's one of my favorite parts of designing dungeons is drawing the maps. Something I have written entirely in Runic that I cannot translate anymore unless I really sit and try and read it. I did a lot of things like that. Notes and letters and journal entries and things that I would actually hand write out and then pass around to the players as sort of a physical prop of something they were looking at. And, you know, I'm sad to say that's something I don't actually do enough anymore. And maybe I should. Since I started doing all my notes on a computer, a lot of that kind of went away. So, well, maybe I should bring some of it back. Let's see. And that's about it for, you know, I've been rambling on and on about character sheets and random plot threads in no particular order. I've probably lost half of you. A couple other things I want to show you before we go. Just really quick. I mentioned how I would do letters and things. You know, like this was an official letter to Zara the Sorceress from the Kingdom of Curast. My drawing is really crappy. But, you know, this slid off, and she'd open it up, and, you know, there'd be a full-blown letter in there. But one of my favorite things I had made, which never got seen by the players in the game, that's another one of those things I planned for. They never made it far enough before the game just up and died. And this was a journal entry they were going to find in this spooky old manor. And this is actually going to start bringing in the vampire Tanya into the story. And it was this, the father of Lathos, a necromancer. See, once again, I had a lot of backstories involving characters' parents and origins and things. He kept a journal. In his son's absence, his son left, and I think they thought their son Lathos was gone. I think they might have thought he died when the demons killed the rest of his family. I'm not sure. I know after that is when he decided to go off and become a necromancer so that he could use that, you know, dark power to fight off the demons and basically avenge his family's death. So it was sort of he was my, you know, almost emo kind of character. He was the tragic character who, you know, his family were killed, and he was this dark, brooding, you know, spellcaster who hung out in tombs and crypts, and yeah. Anyways, so his father was writing this journal which sort of details out their first encounters with the vampire Tanya, who had taken an interest in this family because of their connection to Lathos, who was connected to her fledgling, Mordak. Yeah, it's going to be probably a bit confusing for all of you. But anyways, so yeah, handwritten journal entries that I would like crinkle up and try and age. And the last one, you know, for dramatic effect has some blood on it. You know, not real blood. Or is it? No, it's food coloring. So, you know, it's fun to kind of do that. Be a little more artistic with it, which I just haven't done. I've spent more time just working on the notes rather than physical props, which, you know, if you are good enough at describing things, you don't have to do that. Make physical things for the players to sort of, you know, look at a tangible prop. You don't have to do that, but it's kind of cool. It's definitely something I wouldn't be adverse to doing again, even just once in a blue moon for like something particularly important or relevant to a major moment or something. You know, make something where it would have the most impact to the players for dramatic effect. And lastly, this is something that actually started with my brother's D&D campaign, the D&D Greyhawk campaign setting, which is actually one of the oldest and most famous D&D campaigns. Although not as famous as the Realms, debatably. The Forgotten Realms, which I think the D&D movie, the new one that they're going to try and make, is apparently going to take place in, but we'll see how that goes. They have not had the best luck making D&D into film. But anyways, with my brother's Greyhawk campaign, we started putting together a weekly newsletter. Or no, it was a monthly newsletter, sorry. Which, dealt with, this is before we really had a lot of internet access, too, where you could, Google or look up on a D&D wiki a specific rule or articles, or before you had videos like this with people talking about D&D. So that was sort of our outlet, and it was also a way for the DM to share interesting tidbits with us. But we also had a lot of fun with it. There was interviews with NPCs. It was all for fun. It wasn't actually canon to what actually occurred in the game most of the time. Sometimes. But, or there was the dwarf character, Durgan. It was an NPC in my brother's campaign, and they did the whole Dear Abby thing. It's really silly, but, where you'd write in, Dear Durgan, and I have this problem, and he would give some sort of snarky, gruff dwarf response to it, You're basically asking an old grizzly dwarf for advice, and it was hilarious. I also, we would also use it as a way to acquaint players with lore that the Dungeon Master might deem important, or sort of have a preview of upcoming quests or little hints and things. It was a lot of fun. And I did my own version, which I only got one issue done, because I'm the kind of person who, when I start a project, I end up letting it grow beyond my initial plans, and it ends up getting too big for me. I'm so guilty of that, and I did that with my... it was just so much work, because we all put together the Greyhawk one ourselves. I mean, my brother did most of the work actually on the computer, but we would turn in we would all turn in art, or stuff about our own campaigns, or, it was all kind of a group thing where I tried to go off and do, for the most part, except for I think the interview I had somebody else write up questions, my own newsletter for Diablo, and I did get the first issue done. I called it The Tavern of the Rising Sun. Whereas the one for the Greyhawk campaign, I think, was The Gods Have Ears. And it was just it wasn't just for Greyhawk either. My brother started running another homebrew campaign, and it would include that. And it eventually, in its latest versions, included articles on all the campaigns that we would run for each other, or just tidbits of info, lore, whatever. But for the Tavern of the Rising Sun, which is the name of the inn in Diablo 1, I would go through and... this is pretty much just looking at it, lore that I just sort of paraphrased or copied out of the book to the computer game, just to acquaint them with the history, some of the more important lore that leads up to the events that sort of kick the story of Diablo into motion, and all that. Or snippets of flavor text from the source books for D&D. And then we would have a what's happening, more or less a summarization of what had gone on, things to look forward to in the future, finished quests, current quests, coming soon. A lot of it I took directly from the Gods Have Ears and just did my own version. And it's kind of a cool thing to do, especially if you have a large group of players who are actually able to meet consistently. Of course, now it'd be much easier to post something online, like on a forum or a blog. But back then, we would print out multiple copies of these newsletters and pass them around, and sometimes it would have articles that he would have borrowed from Dragon Magazine or whatever, which was the official D&D magazine, or random articles from different source books that he had, I believe, which you can correct me if I'm wrong, but just different advice for players, or you could ask the Dungeon Master advice. It was just kind of a cool way to get it all down on paper for future reference, and we all had a lot of fun doing it. Yeah, for this issue we interviewed, I let my sister-in-law, she would write the interview questions, usually. and it would sort of give us a more in-depth look at a specific NPC or whatever, or PC too, that were being featured in the newsletter, and sort of give a more in-depth look at who they are, you know, what motivates them, whatever. So it was a cool way to help flesh out and also expand on characters, or sort of reveal things about characters that we didn't know before. Oh yeah, and there was basically a wish list at the end of the newsletters where you would write down like future books that you need to get or want to get, or you know, or just you know, different tools of the trade, you know, paper, pencils, dice, all of the things that one needs when running a Dungeons & Dragons game. So, I've probably talked everybody's ear off for way longer than I intended, but I just like talking about this stuff, and hope to do more random vlogs, not just about D&D, obviously, but there'll probably be some more D&D ones down the road, some more stories I can tell, perhaps, we'll just see. But yeah, Diablo Dungeons & Dragons, it is a thing, for those of you who don't know. You know, you got your 2nd edition Diablo D&D, and then your 3rd edition Diablo D&D Dungeons & Dragons, for all of your playing pleasure, if that's what you want to do. And if not, I still would recommend giving the books a look if you can find them somewhere. Because you may find some things that would still be handy for your campaigns. Like I mentioned the broadsword earlier, which they phased out or got rid of in 3rd edition D&D. I guess it's back in 5th, I seem to remember hearing. But it existed in 2nd, and is not in 3rd, so we wanted to use it for specific situations, characters, and whatnot in our campaigns we're running now. And while one option, I mean, there could be a random D&D book, there's so many. There could be a random one that has the broadsword stats in it or whatever, but we sort of had 2 choices that we were able to find, which is the D&D Wiki online, which has its own version of stats, which is basically identical to a longsword. Or, I was just looking through this book actually for this video, kind of, just to get me ready for it. Obviously, it didn't get me that ready, since I've probably gone off on more tangents than I care to count, but, you know, I rest my case. The broadsword is listed in this 2nd edition book, which, you know, it might actually be the same as the broadsword listed in the standard 2nd edition books, but the point is, I really like the one in here, so even though it's not a 3rd edition stats, I was able to easily convert it to 3rd edition to use for my character who wants to have a broadsword. And you know, that's kind of the fun of homebrews and house rules, as long as your whole gaming group agrees that it's okay to use something from an outside source, or even an older 2nd edition source like this, rather than one from the version of the game you're playing. It doesn't hurt, you know. I mean, every DM is going to have their own rules about doing that sort of thing. But really, as long as everybody's having fun, I'm pretty lax, I think. I'd like to say I'm not very strict about the rules. I mean, if you find something that can fit into the context of the game that isn't necessarily from a source we're using, or even necessarily an official source, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm open to house rules, as long as everybody in the group can agree on it. And usually we're all pretty good. We've not had really any issues, not like some people have had. The worst issues I've ever had trying to play D&D usually tend to come from times in the past where I was much younger and I would try and get my school friends or whatever to play D&D with me, like I mentioned. We would end up rolling up all the characters and stuff, and we would maybe sit down to play, but it just kind of... it would end up derailing into something else, and we never really got them off the ground the way I wanted. It definitely came later when I was able to run sustainable D&D games, but I've never actually ran one with a ginormous, huge group. I mean, usually we're talking like, you know, 5 people max or something like that, you know, which I've heard of games which are much, much bigger, and I wouldn't mind trying to do one sometime. I just have trouble with one-shots because my mind runs away with me, and I can end up having things go way beyond what they initially were intended to be. And that'll usually happen if you get me trying to run a more traditional D&D kind of game where it's just going into the dungeon, fighting monsters, getting treasure, gaining levels, rinse and repeat. I usually end up, not just me now, pretty much all of the campaigns that our gaming group that we run have sort of diverted into much more plot-heavy games than we initially necessarily planned. Maybe. I mean, I could just be speaking a little too much for all of us, but I know that we've definitely become more interested in bigger, more in-depth stories to tell with D&D, even though having a bit of combat every now and then is still a ton of fun. In fact, the last game I played earlier, last night, actually, we fought a kraken, and it was really cool, so. But anyways, yeah, Diablo D&D, you should check it out. It's pretty cool, and as I said, they were able to translate the games, at least the first two, into pretty fun adaptations. So, until the next vlog, I hope you guys enjoyed this enough that you're willing to come back for more. There'll probably be a bit of variety. I know I said I wanted to do some movie reviews like I did with the first KalaVlog that I put up, but I just haven't been getting out to movies lately. And I really... it's okay with popcorn reviews if I review movies that have been out for, however long I want them to have been out for, old movies, new movies, whatever. For the KalaVlogs, I'd rather do them for movies, almost like a reaction, so, like a lot of people do, where I will talk about the movie after getting back from seeing it, or at least within having seen it, recently, preferably a movie that hasn't been out very long, which the last movie I saw in theaters, the last new movie was Captain America Civil War, quite a while ago, so I feel like it'd be a bit too late to make a video about it now, but whatever. Until next time, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and live long and prosper.